Hey guys, it's Godbars here, and this is the 7th episode of my series where I grab an album from my collection, talk about why I love it, what influence it had, and what its place is in the grand scheme of hip-hop. As I mentioned previously, I had inadvertently only had East Coast albums for the first 6, so for this one I wanted to switch coasts and do an LA classic. So I went with Innercity Griots, the landmark second album by a group that was basically the embodiment of fusing jazz and hip-hop, Freestyle Fellowship. If you aren't familiar with the Fellowship, they're a rap crew consisting of Micah 9, AC Alone, Self Jupiter, and Peace, for Alien MCs. AC Alone has some awesome solo albums, and he was also one half of the A-Team with Abstract Rude, a common Freestyle Fellowship affiliate, and together they released a really impressive debut album I've been looking for on vinyl forever. Abstract Rude was also a member of the huge underground crew and label Project Blowed, as were Freestyle Fellowship. If you aren't familiar with Project Blowed, it always slightly confused me personally, even as a Californian, just because Project Blowed was the name of the open mic these rappers would frequent, but it also became the name of the wider collective of artists that cut their teeth on this scene. Since Project Blowed has such a giant, wide-reaching roster that's changed so much over the years, I'll just give some of the most notable members outside of the ones I already named, like CBE, Dumbfounded, Medusa, No Can Do, Raz G, Subtitle, 2Mex, and my two personal favorites outside of Micah 9, which would be Open Mike Eagle and Bus Driver. Open Mike Eagle is a bit of a newer member. His output only really began in the mid-2000s, and along with Milo, or R.A.P. Ferreira as he's known now, they've both been heavily inspired by Micah 9 and Freestyle Fellowship in general, and have kind of carried that torch. They both released some of my favorite projects of the last decade, and so The Flies Don't Come, which was released when he was known as Milo, is my single favorite album from the last decade besides Today I Wrote Nothing by Billy Woods. Unfortunately, to my knowledge, no vinyl exists for the former, at least not where I've been looking, but I do have the first album he released after the name change, Purple Moonlight Pages. This is an absolutely amazing album too, and if you aren't familiar with these artists or this general scene, I'd also recommend checking out Bus Driver's 2014 album, Perfect Hair, as well as Open Mike Eagle's Dark Comedy. Bus Driver, Open Mike Eagle, Milo, No Can Do, and a few other Project Blowed outsiders formed Hellfire Club in the early to mid-2010s, and while they had a really dope tape, it seems the project was ultimately short-lived, since that was the first and last we'd ever hear from them as a collective. But underground and indie rappers aren't the only acts influenced by the Fellowship. You can really trace back that speedy, bouncy kind of flow that a group like Fushnikids would use back to this album, or even their debut, To Whom It May Concern. I've heard Denzel Curry list Freestyle Fellowship as a big influence, and you could definitely hear that Danny Brown listened to them too, because just like Bus Driver, who Danny's actually done a feature with, they both kind of approach hip-hop more like jazz. While Danny Brown could be likened to a trumpet, the guys like Bus Driver, AC Alone, or Micah 9, their flows and patterns are kind of more like a saxophone. This also allowed Freestyle Fellowship to incorporate improvisation. In fact, it kind of even encouraged it, since you could tell the four would push and challenge each other to see who would come up with the most witty, speedy, and unique verses. This has led to pretty much everyone in the Fellowship remaining an insanely sharp MC. Honestly, Micah 9 might be the only rapper I can think of who gets better with age, because unlike a lot of the people who debuted the same time as him, he doesn't seem to have fallen out of love with hip-hop at all. All you need to see how insanely gifted Micah 9 stays to this day is watch practically any freestyle he's done, be it 30 years ago or last year. Honestly, if you want to see how unwavering the talent of the entire group is, check out one of their relatively more recent tracks like We Are, where they quite literally came with a fresher sound in 2011 than many pop rappers debuting on the scene did. If you don't believe me, compare how that song has aged in the last 10 years compared to a song like Party Rock Anthem anthem that came out the same year and was the most popular thing in the world at the time. It's really a testament to what matters in music, entertainment, and to a degree just life, because you'll see a lot of these guys who blew up overnight and just want the money and girls, like Lil Pump. He'll have fans who 5 years ago would shit on a Billy Woods for being nerdy and not fitting the trendy sound at the time or selling as well as Pump, but now I genuinely wouldn't be surprised if Billy Woods is making more money. Even if he isn't richer, he's more culturally relevant, and he's definitely making more than enough to feed his family and live comfortably. And while Lil Pump is getting, less and less relevant with each release, Billy Woods, who's been in the game for over 20 years, is getting more relevant with each release. Back to Innercity Griots, though, it really showcases all corners of these MCs' abilities. You'll have goofy, off-the-wall songs like Shammies, where the flows are super expressive and melodic as usual, but then on a track like Bullies of the Block, they take a more grimy, in-your-face approach. The amount of chemistry these guys have, you'd think they were just locked in a house together for 10 years and weren't allowed to talk to anyone else. They know each other's moves and each other's strengths as well as weak points, which pretty much never end up exposed since you're too busy being entertained. I've mentioned a couple of the previous acts I talked about being inspired and kind of thriving despite or possibly even because of the popularity of guys like Mace and Diddy, but this wasn't exclusive to that time period, nor was it exclusive to the East Coast. In the early 90s, the West Coast G-Funk sound was totally taking over. Albums like The Chronic by Dr. Dre, Doggy Style by Snoop Dogg, and No One Can Do It Better by the DOC. And while I love all those albums and they're complete classics and essential hip-hop listening, there was an amount of artists in California at the time who felt like that G-Funk sound didn't really represent them. Some of these acts included Pharcyde, Alcoholics, and Souls of Mischief. And these acts were still had that California flair, but they were clearly a little more inspired by New York and East Coast production than G-Funk and Dr. Dre and NWA type of production. This also isn't to say that, the G-Funk sound was poppy or bubblegummy or anything like that. Not even close. It's really just that there was an amount of people who identified more heavily with the New York sound. There's still more than enough quality, socially conscious G-Funk albums, and it's not like those are the only two styles in California either. While I believe Digital Underground was the first West Coast Bay Area act to sound a little more New York influenced, in general the Bay has a lot of classic albums that I don't believe technically qualify as G-Funk. They have a little bit of that flair, but they also don't really fit in with the Souls of Mischief Bay Area, more New York inspired stuff. Some of my favorite of these albums would be The Coop, Genocide and Juice, Spice One, America's Nightmare, In a Major Way, E40, and Life is Too Short by Too Short. There's some quality features on Innercity Griots, including Daddy-O and various members of the Heavyweights crew like Volume 10, Ganja K Chronic, and Spoon. Overall, I think this is an album that plays extremely well today, especially in the context of how popular the melodic speedy flows have become. Obviously, when it comes to the influence of that sound, you also can't ignore guys like Busta Rhymes, 3-6 Mafia, and of course, Bone Thugs and Harmony. But I don't think any of them would deny how much influence Freestyle Fellowship had on the rap game, and probably them specifically. But as essential as those acts are to fast rap and melodic rap, you really can't deny that Freestyle Fellowship really kind of birthed that sound. I personally can't find anybody, group, or rapper who have done the kind of verbal gymnastics they were doing on Wax before them. For this classic, my three favorite songs would have to be Inner-City Boundaries, Bullies of the Block, and Park Bench People. Thank you for watching my 7th video. Next time I'm going to move on to the South, so if you want to see which legendary group I'm going to talk about then, don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned in for that. And also let me know what your favorite songs are off of this album. And don't forget to have a great day, and I'll see you next time. Okay? Alright.